southern Egypt. The Aswan granite quarries, on the east bank of the Nile. Half-cut blocks lie scattered across the desert like they were abandoned mid-sentence. Long, curved grooves run across the bedrock in tight, repeating arcs. And lying in the middle of it all is the largest single object ever quarried by human hands. The unfinished obelisk, still fused to the rock it was cut from, cracked before it could be freed. For more than a century, this place has drawn the same question from everyone who visits it. How did people without iron tools do this to stone that modern machinery still struggles with? In early 2026, that question found a new audience. A wave of videos and articles began circulating online claiming that researchers had fed high-resolution scans of the Aswan tool marks into Grok, the AI chatbot built by XAI, and that the system had returned results no one expected. Precision beyond human capability, machine tool signatures, and evidence that overturned everything textbooks say about how the pyramids and their monuments were built. It's a compelling story. It is also, as far as any verifiable record shows, not a real study. Here's what actually happened, what the stone actually shows, and why the difference matters. The Aswan quarries were Egypt's primary source of granite and granodiorite from at least the Old Kingdom through the Roman period, roughly 2600 BCE onward. Granite from this site ended up in the casing and interior chambers of the Giza pyramids, the sarcophagi of pharaohs, the colossal statues at Luxor, and obelisks that still stand today, including several transported to Rome, Paris, and London. Granite is not an easy material. It's an igneous rock made mostly of quartz, feldspar, and mica, and it sits around 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, hard enough that even modern diamond-tipped saws treat it as demanding work. Ancient Egypt had no iron tools capable of cutting it directly. Iron working existed by the New Kingdom, but iron itself is too soft to cut quartz-bearing stone without a harder cutting medium. So the accepted explanation, built from decades of fieldwork, is not that Egyptians cut granite the way you'd cut wood. It's that they broke it down gradually, using a combination of percussion and abrasion. The physical case for this rests on artifacts, not speculation. Archaeologists working at Aswan and other Egyptian quarries have recovered thousands of dolerite hammerstones, rounded balls of an even harder igneous rock, many of them worn smooth from repeated impact. Egyptologist Reginald Engelbach, who surveyed the unfinished obelisk site in the early 20th century, documented these tools directly at the quarry face, embedded in the same trenches as the unfinished cuts. The process, as reconstructed by researchers including Dennis Stocks, who has spent decades doing hands-on experimental archaeology with ancient Egyptian tool replicas, worked roughly like this. Workers pounded dolerite balls or larger mauls against the granite surface, not to shatter it in one blow, but to gradually pulverize it into a fine powder along a marked trench line. Water was likely used to clear debris and may have slightly aided the process by softening surface tension in microfractures, though its main documented role was practical, clearing dust so workers could see the line they were following. This is slow. Stock's experimental work and other replication studies have shown that a team of workers can free a large block using stone pounding methods, but it takes a genuinely enormous amount of labor. Consistent with historical estimates, that quarrying and transporting a single large obelisk required a workforce in the thousands, sustained over months. Once a block was separated, finer work, smoothing surfaces, cutting hieroglyphs, shaping precise interior chambers, used copper tools in combination with abrasive sand, almost certainly quartz sand, which is harder than copper, and did the actual cutting, while the copper tools served mainly as a carrier for the abrasive slurry. This copper anabrasive method is well documented in surviving tools, workshop debris, and abrasive residue found in cut marks under microscopy. It's a completely viable, low-tech, labor-intensive process, and it leaves distinctive marks in the stone, parallel striations from repeated sawing or grinding motions and pounded dimpled surfaces where percussion was used to remove bulk material. None of this required tools we don't have evidence for. It required time, organization, and a workforce most modern states would struggle to mobilize for a construction project, which is, on its own, one of the more remarkable things about the Old Kingdom Egyptian state. It would be dishonest to say the subject is fully settled. Some things about ancient Egyptian stoneworking genuinely aren't well understood, and serious researchers say so. The uniformity of some cut marks, particularly in enclosed or hard-to-reach spaces, has prompted ongoing debate about exactly what tools or techniques were used in specific contexts, whether certain grooves were made by pounding alone, by sawing with copper anabrasive blades, by tubular drilling, a technique with reasonably strong physical evidence, including drill cores recovered from Old Kingdom sites, or by some combination adapted to the specific job. Archaeologists and materials scientists studying these questions generally frame it as a puzzle about which known methods were used, not a puzzle about whether unknown methods were involved. The unfinished obelisk itself remains a genuine point of interest. Modern engineers have modeled how it might have been extracted had it not cracked. And while the physics work out using only manpower, levers, and sand ramps, the scale of the undertaking is still humbling. Some questions about the exact sequence of operations, how workers coordinated the final undercutting to free such an enormous mass, remain open to study. So there is a real, live field of inquiry here. It's just a narrower and more grounded one than lost advanced technology. This is where the viral version of events comes in. Beginning in early to mid-2026, a cluster of YouTube channels and content farm websites began publishing videos and articles with titles like Grok AI finally reveals how ancient Egyptians cut granite, and Grok AI exposes Aswan's secret. The claims varied slightly between versions but followed the same pattern, that researchers had run photogrammetric scans of the Aswan quarry marks through Grok, that the AI had measured entry angles, spacing, and curvature with a precision impossible for hand tools, and that it had matched the marks to modern industrial cutting processes, diamond rotary blades, water jet cutting, ultrasonic tools, with a stated confidence, above 90%. Checking this claim against any verifiable record turns up nothing. There is no published paper. There is no named research team, university department, or dataset anyone can inspect. There's no official statement from XAI describing such a study. What exists is a set of videos that cite each other, reuse the same statistics, and present dramatic-sounding numbers, variation under 5%, spacing consistent within 3%, without showing where those numbers came from, how the measurements were taken, or what they were compared against. This matters because of how large language models, like Grok, actually work. They don't independently examine physical evidence. If someone uploads images or describes measurements and asks the model to speculate about what kind of tool could produce them, the model will generate a plausible-sounding narrative based on the framing of the question. And a model told to compare marks against thousands of tool signatures, ancient and modern, will readily produce confident, specific-sounding output, because generating fluent, structured text is what it's built to do. That output is not the same thing as an independent forensic finding, and treating a chatbot's response to a leading prompt as equivalent to a peer-reviewed materials analysis is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the tool can verify. None of this means every person who watched or shared these videos was being credulous. The videos are well produced, use real footage of the actual quarry, and lean on a genuine, publicly documented feature of the site. The marks really are there, and they really are visually striking. The dramatization sits on top of real rock. That's what makes it effective, and also what makes it worth being careful about. The specific numbers repeated across these videos, variation of a few percent, entry angles consistent within 2 degrees, confidence levels above 90%, are the kind of figures that sound rigorous, but, without a published methodology, can't actually be checked. Real precision claims in archaeology come with stated sample sizes, measurement protocols, and error margins that other researchers can scrutinize and attempt to replicate. None of the viral claims about Aswan meet that bar. There's also a selection effect problem baked into this kind of content. A quarry with thousands of individual cut marks, made across centuries by many different workers, using percussion in some places and abrasive sawing in others, will naturally contain some marks that look more regular than others, simply by chance, by skill, or by differences in technique for different jobs. Highlighting the most visually uniform examples and treating them as representative of the whole site is a common rhetorical move in this genre of content. and it produces a misleading impression of the evidence as a whole. The corundum claim that microscopic abrasive grains at Aswan match industrial-grade material deserves particular skepticism. There's no published mineralogical analysis supporting this from any credible source. Egypt does have known ancient uses of emery, a corundum-bearing rock, for polishing in later periods, but there's no verified evidence tying that to the specific claims made in these videos about Old Kingdom granite quarrying specifically, let alone about industrial diamond abrasive cutting, which has no supporting evidence anywhere in the archaeological record. Strip away the unverified claims, and what's left is still an extraordinary story, arguably a more interesting one, because it's about people rather than mystery machines. The organizational achievement at Aswan is real and well documented. Moving a workforce numbering in the thousands, feeding and housing them, coordinating shifts of grueling manual labor against one of the hardest common rocks on Earth, and doing it precisely enough to produce standing monuments that have survived 4,500 years. That's not a lesser accomplishment than